Have you ever thought you raised your child right, and yet felt like you lost them to the world? Donna Celia was collecting the clothes drying on the line. The afternoon sun was blazing, and the damp clothes felt heavy in her hands as she folded them carefully. It was Monday. Laundry day, like every Monday for the last decade. She picked up Gabriel's jacket, the blue jacket he'd been asking for so much, the one she'd saved up 3 months of cleaning to buy. As she took it off the clothesline, something fell out of the pocket. A small package, wrapped in white plastic. Celia stared at it for a few seconds. Her heart began to beat faster, but she didn't know why. Just a premonition. That tingling sensation mothers know when something is wrong. She took the package with slightly trembling hands. It was small, so small it fit in one hand. It weighed little, too little to change an entire life. It opened, and the ground disappeared beneath his feet. Inside was white powder, very white. So white it shone like crystal in the afternoon sunlight. There was also a small mirror, a blade. Things she recognized only from news reports, from things mothers pray never happen. She prayed every day for God to protect her son. She never imagined that danger lived inside her home. Inside the house she had kept clean, organized, and filled with love. Inside the blue jacket she had saved 3 months to buy. The wet clothes fell from her lap onto the dirty backyard floor. She didn't move. She just stood there, holding the package, staring at it as if it were an artifact from another planet. It couldn't be true. It wasn't possible. It wasn't her Gabriel. It was a mistake, a mix-up. Someone had planted it there. It had to be this way. But his heart knew the truth. Donna Celia didn't start life with advantages. Far from it. She was born into a simple family, too humble for words to adequately describe. In a peripheral neighborhood where the houses were built of hand-painted brickwork, and the streets lacked proper asphalt, just compacted dirt that turned to mud when it rained. His father, Su Ottavio, worked as a bricklayer. He would wake up at 4 in the morning, before the sun even rose, grab his bag of tools he'd inherited from his father, and leave the house. He built houses for wealthy people, mansions he could never have lived in. He would return at night with his hands bloody with calluses, his body weary from so much work, his lungs polluted by dust and cement. Her mother, Donna Maria, cared for 7 children at home, 7 mouths to feed, 7 bodies to clothe, 7 souls to raise with principles. Besides taking care of the house, she cleaned on weekends to generate extra income. Celia remembers seeing her mother washing the clothes of wealthy people on weekends, while caring for all her siblings. Celia learned early on that life isn't easy. She learned that easy is the word for people with money. She learned to care for her younger siblings when she was just 8. She learned to wash clothes by hand, to stretch every penny of the family income, to make meals with almost no ingredients. She learned that sacrifice is the name of any mother, that renunciation is the price of raising children with dignity. Her father was her first hero. He worked because he had to, but he never complained. He'd come home tired, sit on the only sofa they had, and hug Celia. She remembers sleeping on his lap, the smell of work wafting from his clothes, the sense of security a hug from her father could give. When Celia was 15, her father had a minor accident at work. Nothing serious, just a fall that left scars. But Celia noticed something different about him afterward. There was something broken that wasn't just his body. It was as if he had aged 10 years and a day. At 17, Celia met Roberto. He worked as a laborer, carrying construction materials. He had a strong back, calloused hands, and the simple dreams of any young person born poor, to get married, have children, and build a dignified life as best he could. Roberto had a smile that lit up his entire face whenever he saw Celia. He looked at her as if she were the most important thing in the world, as if he'd won the lottery of life by meeting her. He called her my flower, and though it sounds corny now that she thinks about it, at that moment it sounded like poetry. They married in a simple ceremony, in a small neighborhood church. There wasn't much money for a big party, but there was a lot of love. Celia's dress had been sewn by a neighbor. The flowers were picked from a community garden. The cake was from the bakery on the corner. But there was sincerity in every detail. They both worked tea in construction, she in cleaning, and saved every penny to have their own home. They dreamed of a small house, nothing big, just something that was theirs. When Celia discovered she was pregnant with Gabriel, she cried with joy for 3 days straight. Roberto picked her up and spun her around in the air, laughing like a child. Laughing like a man who had conquered the world. This baby was the fulfillment of a dream they shared. Gabriel was born on a rainy March morning. Celia remembers every detail of that day, as if it were yesterday, the baby's cries echoing through the delivery room. The father's tears upon seeing his son for the first time, the feeling that her life had gained even greater purpose, a reason to wake up every day. They were happy, poor, but happy. They had little, but they had each other. And they had Gabriel. Roberto adored his son. He would come home tired from work, but when Gabriel cried, Roberto would transform. He would pick up the baby, dance with him, and sing off-key songs that left Gabriel screaming with laughter. When Gabriel was just 7 years old, everything changed. Roberto died in a workplace accident. A fall no one expected, from a height that shouldn't have been fatal. But it was. He fell from the 3rd floor of a building under construction. Paramedics arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. Celia became a widow overnight. And Gabriel became an orphan before he even understood what death was. She remembers that day as if it were yesterday. The police arriving at the door. The words she couldn't process. The silence that followed. The silence that weighs more heavily than any scream. She had no time for despair, for regrets, for sinking into depression. She had to work. She had to pay rent, pay food, and pay for her son's schooling. She had to be both mother and father. She increased her cleaning hours. She began cleaning doctors' offices, sophisticated residences in the city's upscale neighborhoods. She would wake up at dawn and return late at night, but tanned. This is important. Whenever she got home, she cleaned herself up and felt beautiful for her son. She took off her work clothes, washed her tired face, and listened to every story Gabriel had to tell about his day. Whenever Gabriel ran to hug her at the door, she shook off her fatigue and smiled. A genuine smile, because he was the reason she was alive. "My son, God will protect you," she whispered as she tucked him in, stroking his hair. "The world is difficult, but God will protect you, and I will be here to protect you, always. As long as I live, I will protect you." Gabriel grew up hearing these words. He grew up watching his mother struggle every day to get the bare minimum. He grew up knowing that her sacrifice was made out of pure love. She took him to school, helped with his homework, bought him books when she could. Books she stole from her workplace, books her bosses threw away. Gabriel didn't know they were stolen. To him, they were gifts from his mother. When Gabriel entered high school, Celia's eyes were filled with pride. He was a good student. He was dedicated. He was the boy the teachers called a role model. "You will be a good man," she said to her son, taking his hands. "I will work as hard as it takes for you to have a good education. I will pray every day for God to protect you from evil. The world is dangerous, Gabriel, but you will be stronger than the danger." Gabriel was a good son, respectful, dedicated to his studies, and affectionate toward his mother. He had friends at school, participated in community projects, and was active in the community. He was the boy his neighbors called a role model for parenting. Celia would wake up very early, pray, ask for protection for her son with the sincerity of a woman who truly believes, and go to work knowing she had done everything right. She believed that love was enough to protect, that her sacrifice was a sufficient shield against the dangers of the world, that the faith she planted in her son's heart was a root too strong for any wind to uproot. She didn't know the wind was stronger. The first sign arrived discreetly, like almost everything dangerous in life. It didn't arrive shouting. It arrived whispering. Gabriel started coming home later. Before, he'd always be there when Celia got home from work around 6 o'clock, doing homework, watching TV, waiting for her to prepare dinner, which he'd eagerly eat. Now, he started coming home later. Much later. 8 o'clock. 9. Sometimes 10. "Where have you been, my son?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm, trying not to sound accusatory. "You should have warned me." "I was at a friend's house," he would reply, his eyes averted, studying the floor as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. "Studying. We were doing a school project. It's all good." Celia tried to believe it. She tried so hard. She wanted to believe it. But there was something in his tone that wasn't quite true. There was something between the lines, in that averted glance, in that slightly aggressive tone, that she couldn't quite put her finger on, but felt like a stone in her stomach. Then came the more obvious changes, the ones that could not be denied. Gabriel became distant. His gaze, once direct and gentle, seeking hers when they spoke, became vacant. He spent hours shut in his room, the door locked, the music too loud, no one allowed in. When she tried to talk, he responded with monosyllables, with gestures of irritation that hadn't existed before. There was a new coldness in him, as if he had been replaced by another Gabriel who resembled her own, but wasn't quite him. "Is everything okay at school?" she asked as she prepared dinner, trying to keep the conversation natural. "Yes, Mom," he would answer, already walking to the room. "How was class? What did you learn today?" "Normal. Nothing special," he replied without even looking at her. Conversations that had once been long, warm, filled with stories about his day, what he'd learned, his friends, his dreams now lasted seconds. Gabriel ate quickly, refusing the food she'd prepared with such care, the food made with what little they had, saying he wasn't hungry, that he'd eaten at his friend's house. Celia noticed all of this. A mother notices everything. It's like there's a sixth sense that awakens when you have a child. She started noticing strange things on her clothes. A cigarette smell that wasn't hers, that didn't come from anyone she knew. Holes in the sleeves of some shirts, as if someone had smoked something lying there. Stains she couldn't explain. She didn't want to believe it, but the feeling grew stronger every day. It grew like a poisonous plant she couldn't pull out. One night, she was picking up his clothes from the bedroom floor because now he'd stopped doing that too. Stopped helping around the house when she saw his fingernails. They were black, marked by something she couldn't quite identify, but it felt like a burn. She'd touched her son's hands while he slept, and felt something was different, that he was different, that this wasn't her Gabriel anymore. "My son isn't like that. God forbid," she whispered to herself as she washed clothes in the early hours of the morning when she couldn't sleep. "My Gabriel is a good boy. He's going to be someone in life. He's going to make a difference. He's not like that. He can't be." But her heart knew the truth. She tried to talk to him about drugs, about the dangers of the world, about how God was always watching, always judging, always ready to punish. She brought news reports about overdoses, about how drugs were destroying young people. But Gabriel just listened with a look of absolute boredom, as if his mother were speaking a strange language from another planet. "Mom, you're paranoid," he said one night, with an aggression she'd never seen in her son. "You're seeing things where there aren't any. Do you want me to be trapped in this house? Do you want me to be a failure? Do you want me to work like you?" The words came out of his mouth like poison. Celia felt each one sink into her chest. "You want me to stay here, praying, working 24 hours a day to have the minimum? Is that what you want for me, Mother?" Celia was silent. This hurt her more than any scream could have. She began to lose sleep. She lay awake all night, listening to every noise on the street, waiting for him to arrive. When he finally did, she breathed a sigh of relief, but the peace didn't last long, because it was obvious something was up. On weekends, she'd notice him disappearing for hours at a time. He'd say he was going to a friend's house, studying, or exercising. But he'd return with strange eyes, that strange gleam she recognized from stories of people she knew who were struggling. She prayed more than ever. She would kneel by her bed at night when she couldn't sleep and whisper prayers that came from the depths of her soul, from that part of her heart that only mothers have. "God, take care of my son. Keep away from him any evil, any person with a bad influence. Save my Gabriel, please God. Save my boy. I'll do anything, but save him." But it seemed that his prayers did not reach heaven. One day, while she was washing Gabriel's clothes, her hand touched something strange in the pocket of his blue jacket. Something small, very small, wrapped in plastic, something her mind recognized but her heart refused to accept. She froze completely. His instincts screamed at him not to open it, to put it back in his pocket and pretend he hadn't seen it, to live a lie one more day, one more night, just one more day before he had to face that truth. But Celia was never a woman to pretend. She was never a woman to live a lie. With her hands shaking uncontrollably, she opened the little package. The white powder glistened in the afternoon sunlight like a physical demon, like it had a life of its own. It shone like crystal, like crushed glass, like snow falling on a hellish day. Celia stood motionless for a few seconds that felt like hours. Her hands held the package, but it was as if they weren't her hands, as if they were happening to a body that wasn't hers, as if she were watching her own life from the outside, like an observer in a horror film. She stared at it, her mind trying to process it, trying to find an explanation that made sense, a rational reason why her son, her Gabriel, the boy she had raised alone, the boy she had prayed for every day of his life, would have this in his pocket. Maybe it was for a friend. Maybe he'd found out there. Maybe it was... She couldn't think of any. Maybe that would work. No explanation that would make it acceptable. Inside the package was also a small pocket mirror and a disposable razor. Things she recognized only from news reports, from documentaries she'd seen on TV, from things mothers desperately pray never happen to their children. Celia felt anger begin to rise in her stomach. A rage she had never felt before. A pure, primal rage that burned inside her like fire. A fire that consumed anything that stood in its way. She tucked the package into her bag with the mirror and the blade, the evidence of her failure as a mother. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for what could have been minutes or hours. She had no sense of time. He waited. Gabriel arrived around 7 o'clock in the evening, as he always did around that time. He walked through the door as if it were any other day, as if nothing had changed in the world. But Celia could see he was different. His eyes shone strangely, that glow she had begun to recognize. There was something in the air around him that she understood now, even if her mind resisted naming it. "Gabriel, sit here," she said, pointing to the living room chair in a voice that wasn't quite her own. It was the voice of a mother on the verge of collapse. He relaxed his posture, immediately becoming defensive. His son knew. The first moment he looked into his mother's eyes, he knew he'd been discovered. His body confirmed what his mouth would still deny. "Mom, he began to say. "Sit," she said, firmer, more authoritative than she had ever been. He sat down. Celia placed the package in front of him on the table, revealing everything. Revealing the secret he had kept. His face changed. From surprise to anger. From anger to ... anger. An anger that mirrored her own. "Where did you find it?" he asked, his voice sharp as broken glass. "In your jacket. When you were picking up the laundry." "Mom, it's not what it seems." He began with that sentence all liars begin with. "Isn't it? Then what is it?" she asked, her voice breaking in half. "What is it, Gabrielle? Explain to Mom. Explain to Mom how you, my son, who I raised, who I prayed every day to protect, how are you involved in this?" She pointed at the package with a strength that came from the depths of her being, from the darkest caverns of a disappointed mother's soul. Gabriel stood up quickly. The chair fell backward with a noise that echoed through the small house like a gunshot. "Mom, you don't understand." He began to scream, that youthful rage that mixes truth with lies. "You don't know what it's like out there. Do you think it's easy? Do you want me to be weak? Do you want me to work like you do? Tired, dirty, and never achieve anything? It's not about getting rich, Gabriel. It's about being a good person." "It's about what?" he interrupted, his eyes filled with a hatred she'd never seen in her son. "About suffering like you suffered. About working like you work. About sacrificing everything like you did. Well, Mom, I don't want to have a life like yours. I don't want to smell like garbage and dirty water for the rest of my life. I don't want to be invisible. I want to be somebody." Gabriel's words fell like knives, like swords, like bullets. Celia felt each one piercing her chest, each leaving a wound she knew would never fully heal. I gave my life for you, Gabriel, she whispered, tears beginning to flow uncontrollably. I gave everything, everything I had, everything I am, and this is what you do to her. Did you give, or did you just do it? He asked with the cruelty only teenage children can muster, the cruelty that comes from a lack of maturity and pain he couldn't process. Because I never asked you to raise me alone. I never asked you to work yourself to exhaustion. You chose to do this. And now you want me to be grateful? You want me to feel guilty? Celia felt the ground disappear. Literally, physically, as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Her son, that baby she had held in her arms when he was born. That boy who kissed her wounds when he was hurt. That teenager she had raised alone was speaking to her as if she were an enemy. Gabriel, please, she began, stepping closer, holding out her hand. Don't touch me, he said, raising his hands defensively. You know what's hard. Not using waking up, and not wanting to use. Sleepless nights because your body asks for it. Because your body demands it. Because your body won't accept it. That's hard. It's not praying and working, Mom. That's hard. It's real. He was admitting it. He was confessing. And Celia felt each word like a punch in the gut. Like a bomb exploding in her chest. For how long? She asked, her voice hoarse. How long have you been using? Gabriel didn't answer. He just stood there, breathing heavily, his fists clenched, his entire body rigid with tension. Answer, she screamed, her voice breaking with pure despair. How long has it been, Gabriel? How long has my son been killing himself? A year, he whispered finally. About a year, 1 year, 365 days, 8,600 hours of lies. A whole year of Celia believing that everything was fine, that she had done everything right, that her son was a good man. But he had been breaking down all this time. A year of nights when Celia prayed, unaware that danger lurked in the next room. A year of her sacrifice meaning absolutely nothing because he didn't want that sacrifice to mean anything. Celia felt her legs weaken. She sat down in the chair, her body shaking as if an earthquake were raging inside. Oh my God, she whispered, her hands on her face. Oh my God, what did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong, Mom, he said, and there was something sincere in that tone now. A frustration mixed with regret that he didn't know how to express. You did everything right. You did everything perfect. But the world is broken, and I am broken. No amount of faith or sacrifice will fix that. He took the package from the table. Gabriel, no, please, she began, holding out her hand. But he was already leaving the house. He grabbed his blue jacket, flung open the door, and slammed it so hard that the windows of the little house shook. Celia found herself on the floor. Literally, physically on the floor, kneeling, hands in her hair, crying in a way her body had never cried before. A cry that came from the depths of her soul. A cry that came from a place she didn't know existed. Your prayers were of no avail. Your sacrifice was for nothing. His love had not been enough. And that was the truth she would have to learn to carry. The days that followed were like living inside a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. No matter how much she screamed, no matter how much she begged, Celia would wake up in the middle of the night, with her heart racing, still panicked, still hoping it had all been a dream. She waited for that moment when she'd opened her eyes and realized it had just been a nightmare. One of those bad nightmares that leave a mark long after you wake up. But it wasn't. The blue jacket was still there, hanging on the coat rack in the living room, staring at her like a silent accusation. The package hadn't disappeared. Reality hadn't withered. She didn't know where Gabriel had gone that night. He simply disappeared. Some nights he would come back to sleep, arriving late, silent as a ghost, disappearing the next morning without a word. Other nights he didn't return. Celia would lie awake, praying, imagining the worst. Imagining your son was on a dark street. Imagining he overdosed. Imagining he was with people worse off than him. Imagining he was suffering. Celia stopped going to work. She simply stopped. She stopped keeping her appointments. She left her bosses waiting. She lost the cleaning clients she had earned through years of dedication. She lost the income that kept her afloat. But she couldn't leave the house, couldn't stop waiting for Gabriel to arrive. Her neighbors began to notice the change. Donna Celia, who had always been so clean, so careful, so organized, began leaving the house a mess. Her plants died because she forgot to water them, because caring for them seemed meaningless now. Her food rotted in the refrigerator because she couldn't eat it, because it seemed to have lost its taste. She lost weight. She lost a lot of weight. Her clothes started to fit her loosely. People who saw her were surprised. Coworkers who knew her from cleaning asked if she was sick, if there was anything they could do. Yes, she wanted to answer desperately. I'm sick. I'm dying. My son is dying and I don't know how to save him. But she just smiled weakly and said everything was fine. That she was just tired. That she'd just had the flu. She began to withdraw. Before, she was that cheerful woman who chatted with her neighbors, who attended Mass every Sunday, who was known for her unwavering faith and dedication. Now, she avoided going out. Because she was ashamed. Ashamed that anyone would find out about Gabriel. Ashamed that they would know she had failed as a mother. That she had failed to protect her son from the world. A neighbor came to visit one afternoon. A woman named Donna Marta, who lived 3 doors down, and who had been a friend for years. Celia, dear, what happened to you? She asked, her tone sincere and concerned. You don't look well. You disappeared. Nothing, Marta, it's okay. Just tired, Celia replied, trying to smile convincingly, but failing miserably. You don't look well. You look like you're dying, she said, with the sincerity that only a longtime friend can have. The kind of sincerity that hurts because it comes from someone you love. Celia just smiled emotionlessly, like one of those dull smiles that blinks. After Marta left, she knelt and cried again. She cried because the truth had come out, because Marta had seen through the mask. She spent hours praying, hours kneeling in front of the small image of Our Lady on the wall, an image her father had given her when she was a child, praying in a way that bordered on absolute desperation. God, save my son, she whispered, her lips trembling. Even if you have to break my heart, save my Gabriel. God, I will do whatever it takes. Take this pain from me and put it in him if you must. But please, save my son. Save him from addiction. Save him from himself. But God didn't answer. Or at least, not in the way she expected. God's answer, when it came, was always different from what people expected. One night, she woke to a noise in the living room. A strange noise. She opened the bedroom door and found Gabriel climbing in through the living room window. He was so dirty, so badly hurt, his clothes torn and his forehead bloodied. Gabriel, she screamed, running to him with all the energy she had left in her body. He fell into his mother's arms. And for the first time since the discovery, she felt that her son was still her son. That there was still a human there. Broken, tired, asking for help without words. Mom, he whispered into her hair, and there was something childlike in that whisper. She took him to his room, cleaned his wounds with care and devotion, and gave him food and water. While she did this, Gabriel slept soundly, as if he had sunk to rock bottom, and finally stopped struggling. Celia stayed there all night, just looking at her son, praying silently. When he awoke, he looked like a different man. There was something in his eyes that had changed. A clarity that hadn't been there before. Mom, he said, sitting up slowly, I need help. They were the most important words he had said in months. 2 days passed, and Gabriel didn't wake up properly. He slept, woke up in pain, drank water, and went back to sleep. His skin was pale, translucent. His eyes looked like someone who had seen too much. Celia could tell he was suffering, not just from the wounds on his body, the bruises covering his arm, evidence of the life he'd led for the past few weeks, but from what was coming from within. She recognized that suffering because she'd seen it in stories she'd heard in the community, from women who visited the church searching for lost children. I recognized the emptiness in the eyes of someone who had touched too deeply into something they shouldn't have. On the 3rd night, Gabriel woke screaming, sweaty, shaking, having nightmares that transported him to dark places. His screams echoed through the small house. Celia ran into the room, hugged him, and calmed him down with the patience that only a mother has. "Mom, I can't do it," he whispered between screams. "I can't do it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore." Celia felt her heart race. It was that moment. That exact moment she had prayed for so long. Her son was asking for help. Her son wanted to get out of the depths of despair. "It's okay, my son," she whispered, kissing his forehead repeatedly. "Mommy is here. Mommy will take care of you. You're not alone." In the following days, Celia did something most mothers do when faced with what she was facing. She sought professional help. She went to the community center. She asked about rehabilitation clinics. She talked to people whose children were going through the same thing. She discovered support groups, therapists, medication, and possible paths when everything seemed impossible. She knocked on doors looking for resources. She asked for financial assistance. She sought out public clinics. She spoke with people who knew the subject, and in the process, she discovered that she wasn't the only mother mourning in silence. There were so much silent pain, so much unjust guilt, so much invisible struggle. A social worker helped her find a rehabilitation program at a public clinic that had a waiting list but would accept Gabriel quickly because there was a bed available. When she got Gabriel into a rehab program, she allowed herself to cry with relief for the first time in months. "You're going to be okay, my son," she said, holding his hand at the entrance to the clinic. "I'll be with you every step of the way. We'll get through this together. Like we always do. Like we've always gotten through everything together." The first days of rehab were terrible. Gabriel suffered without the drug. His body cried out, his nerves screamed, his entire being demanded the substance that had become more important than anything else. But Celia was there every day, talking, supporting, praying, and crying with him. She attended the family classes the clinic offered. She learned about addiction. She learned that it wasn't her fault. She learned that love, no matter how powerful, can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. But love can create the conditions for that person to want to be saved. She started attending a support group for mothers of people with substance use disorders. And it was there that she found strength she didn't know she had. Women who, like her, had broken children. Women who prayed every day. Women who blamed themselves unfairly. Women who learned, along the way, that guilt was just another form of denial. "I couldn't have done differently with what I knew," one of the women said in a support circle, her voice shaking. "You did everything you could with what you had. If you knew better, you would have done better." Celia cried when she heard this, because it was true. It was a truth she needed to hear from another mother to believe. She had done everything she could. Months passed. Gabriel began participating in therapy. He began to talk about his emotions, something teenagers don't do naturally. He began to understand that he had chosen this path, but that it didn't mean he had to end up there. He began to understand that he was more than his mistakes. One afternoon, Gabriel asked to speak with his mother outside the rehabilitation center, on a bench in the nearby park. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, sitting on a bench, staring at the street as if searching for the words. "I'm sorry for what I said, for what I did, for the years I wasted watching you suffer." Celia took her son's hand gently, carefully, as if she were holding something sacred. "I raised you to win, Gabriel," she said softly, the voice of a mother who had learned that sometimes love means letting go, not to be perfect, to win. "I don't think I've won," he replied, his voice low. "I'm far from winning. I'm just trying not to back down." "You woke up," she said firmly. "You asked for help. You're fighting. You're facing the pain without using it to escape. That's winning, my son. Winning is waking up every day and choosing to win." Tears streamed down Gabriel's face. "How do you still believe me?" he asked, and there was desperation in that question. "How can you look me in the eye after everything I've said, after everything I've done?" "Because you're my son," she replied simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "That's enough. You could have done much worse, and you would still be my son. A mother's love has no limits, Gabriel." It has no conditions. You don't have to earn my love. You already have it. Always have. Always will. The following months were spent in slow, difficult reconstruction, with advances and setbacks. Gabriel attended therapy regularly. Celia returned to cleaning, but this time to pay for her son's rehabilitation and the therapists he needed. She also became a facilitator for a mother's support group, sharing her story and giving hope to other women who were at rock bottom, just as she had been. She discovered there was power in her story. The power to save others from despair. The power to make a difference when it seemed like no difference was possible. One night, Gabriel was helping Celia wash the dishes. They were silent, that comfortable silence returning between them. Gabriel began to speak. "Mom, I wanted to try going back to school," he said as he dried a plate. "I wanted to finish high school. I wanted to try going to college in the future. I wanted to have a real career. I wanted to stop being a burden to you." Celia stopped washing the dishes. She turned to her son with teary eyes. She kissed him hard on the forehead. "I knew you could do it," she whispered into his hair. "I always knew you could. Because you're my son. And you're too strong to let drugs win." 8 months after the initial discovery, Gabriel was formally out of the rehab program. He still attended support groups twice a week, still had a therapist he saw regularly, and was still undergoing ongoing medical follow-up. But most importantly, he was becoming human again. He was rebuilding himself. Celia returned to her cleaning job with renewed intensity. But something had fundamentally changed in how she viewed the job. It was no longer just a way to make money. It was part of a mission she had discovered, to help other mothers. Her clients noticed a different strength in her. A woman who had been through the fire and come out the other side. A woman who bore the scars of battle but still smiled. A client, a woman whose daughter had similar problems to Gabriel's, asked Celia one day while she was cleaning the living room, "How did you do it?" The question was filled with desperation. How did you manage to deal with all of this without giving up? How did you manage to love your son when he was so lost? Celia stopped working and sat down on the sofa next to her wife. "I gave up many times," she answered honestly, and there was truth in every word. "I really gave up. There were nights when I thought I couldn't do it anymore. There were days when I thought I'd done everything wrong. But my son needed me not to give up. So I kept going. Not because it was easy. Because I had to." The woman cried, and Celia hugged her, like a mother hugs another mother. Gabriel began returning to school. Shy at first, but he returned. His teachers noticed something different about him, a maturity that came from having hit rock bottom and chosen to leave. The school had a program for students who needed extra support. Gabriel got involved. He began helping younger students who were going through what he had. He began speaking at school assemblies about addiction, about how easy it was to fall into it, and how difficult it was to get out. At home, things gradually started to get back to normal. Gabriel helped with the household chores. He and Celia cooked together on weekends. He prepared the seasoning. She prepared the recipe. They talked about school, the future, dreams that didn't involve escapism or denial. One night, during dinner, Gabriel asked as they ate the food they had made together, "Mom, do you believe I'll ever be able to get out of this for real? That the addiction will be a thing of the past?" Celia placed her hand over his, touching his wrist, which now had tattoos of sobriety, of dates set. "I already see you leaving," she replied with conviction. "You already left, my son. What you did now was choose not to go back. Choose to win each day." Gabriel nodded, but there was doubt in his eyes. "Some days it's hard," he confessed with the honesty only someone who's been through it can muster. "Some days I want to. Sometimes the desire is almost physical. But then I remember you. I remember how you prayed for me when I was lost, how you gave everything. And I remember why I decided to stop." Celia kissed her son's hand. "I'll be here through every hard day," she promised. "Every moment you feel weak. Every night the longing returns. I'll be here, praying, fighting, holding your hand." Months turned into years. Gabriel graduated from high school and entered a public university with a full scholarship. Celia was in the audience on graduation day, with her son's diploma framed on the wall of her huma, diploma that had cost far more than any other child's. One day, when Gabriel was already in his second year of university and doing well, he asked his mother during a meal, "Have you ever thought about giving up? Seriously, Mom. Have you ever thought about leaving me at the bottom alone? Have you ever thought about abandoning me?" Celia was silent for a moment. A question she knew would come one day. "Yes," she answered honestly. "There were times when I thought I couldn't take it anymore. That the pain was so great I couldn't carry it. That the sadness was so deep I would drown. I had nights when I wished God would take me, but death would be easier than the life I was living." Gabriel looked at her intensely. "But you didn't give up," he observed. "I didn't give up. Because you were my son. Because there was a part of you that was still mine. And because a mother's love doesn't give up. It suffers, it hurts, it almost kills you, but it doesn't give up." Gabriel hugged his mother tightly, the hug of a man he had learned to love deeply. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "Thank you for not leaving me. Thank you for keeping going when it was easier to stop." Celia began attending the Mothers' Support Group not only as a participant, but as a voice and witness. She told her story: the discovery in the package, the fall into the void, the silent suffering, the rescue, the painful reconstruction. And other mothers, who were at rock bottom, found hope in her eyes and strength in her words. "Not every mother wins the war," she would say to the group, as the women around her listened with rapt attention. "But none of them give up the battle. Because a mother's love isn't an option, it's who you are." Her colleagues, who knew her before everything happened, didn't recognize the Celia she now was. She was the same woman physically, but with something different radiating from her. A strength that came from having endured the worst and survived. A woman who knew the depths of suffering and the heights of hope. One night, Celia and Gabriel were sitting on the porch of the small house, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors that seemed like God's brushstrokes. "Mom, do you think Dad would be proud?" Gabriel asked, and there was nostalgia in that question. Nostalgia for a man he had barely known. Celia smiled with deep longing. "Your father would be so proud of who you are. Of who you are becoming. Of how you had the courage to fight. Of how you chose to win when it was easier to succumb. And you?" asked Gabriel. Celia took her son's hand and kissed it. "Your father always knew I was the strongest woman he knew. And now you know it too." Gabriel rested his head on his mother's shoulder as the sun disappeared over the horizon. Her love didn't save him, but it made him want to be saved. And in that moment, under that sunset, they both understood that this was the simplest and most profound truth, that sometimes, love doesn't save. But love changes a person enough to make them want to save themselves. Not every mother wins the war, but none gives up the battle. If you're listening to this story and your heart aches, it's because you know this pain. Maybe you're a mother who discovered her son was using. Maybe you're a son who's in the pit and thinks his mother has given up. Maybe you're someone who loves someone who's broken and doesn't know how to help. Know that you are not alone. This story of Celia and Gabriel is the story of millions of families who live this in silence. Mothers who pray at dawn. Children who suffer without knowing how to escape. Families that fall apart and must learn to put themselves back together, piece by piece. The story isn't about having it easy. It's not about everything getting better quickly. It's not about a magical recovery or an instant cure. It's about holding on when everything screams for you to stop. It's about loving even when the one you love is hurting both you and themselves. Celia wasn't a heroine. She was just a mother. A tired, poor woman who worked every day of her life. A woman who failed many times, who blamed herself unfairly, who slept with her heart racing for months. But she had one thing the drugs couldn't take away: faith. Faith that her son was more than her mistakes. Faith that there was salvation even when all seemed lost. Faith that love, even when it hurts, even when it breaks your heart, is still the most powerful thing there is. Gabriel wasn't a lost case. He was a boy who was lost. There was a crucial difference between being lost and being lost. The lost can still be found. And Celia never stopped searching. If you are listening to this story and are going through something similar, know that it's not your fault. You did everything you could with what you had. You prayed, you worked, you loved. It's not your fault if the person you love chose a path you can't stop. You can't save anyone who doesn't want to be saved. But you can be there when that person is ready to rise. You can offer your hand. You can pray. You can not give up. Because a mother's love or any deep, genuine love isn't about not letting someone fall. It's about being there when they're ready to get back up. It's about believing that redemption is always possible. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Tell us, do you know a similar story? Are you going through something similar right now? Do you have a son, daughter, or family member who's on this dangerous path? You are not alone. Millions of people are going through what you're going through. And there is hope. There is always hope. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to know there is hope. That there is always hope as long as there is someone praying and fighting. Follow the channel, because here we tell stories of real people, who suffer, who love, who believe that a new beginning is always possible. Stories of mothers who don't give up. Stories of children who choose to win. Every story is a mirror. And every mirror shows that life, even when broken, can still be beautiful. That suffering is not the end. That there is always a new beginning waiting for us. Until next time, and remember, every mother who weeps in silence carries within her the strength of 1,000 miracles. Every child who fights their demons is brave beyond measure. And every story of recovery is a miracle worth telling.